It's not that deep. Everything love, lust, and life.
Sex. We talk about it so you can get better at it. We can all get better at it and maybe feel a bit happier in the process. It's not that deep. Or is it?
Hi, and welcome to our newest episode of Sex, It's Not That Deep. Today we're talking about the orgasm gap. So I'm here with my good friends Fran and Andy, who are married, and my name is Rebecca. So when we talk about the orgasm gap, we are talking about how women do not orgasm as much as men do in sex and outside of sex as well. It's quite a topic that we are definitely interested in, I think, in discussing and getting to the bottom of, and maybe having some soapbox passionate moments about. I think you'd agree with me, Fran.
Yeah, probably, yeah. We were actually just talking about this literally just before, whilst walking the dogs, was about the difference in the amount of times we masturbate between ourselves.
Yeah.
And I'm roughly half as much as you, aren't I? And that's just our natural libido levels. Is just lower. And I think that it doesn't translate so much into sex with us, because I'm quite a hunter of an orgasm. So we do pretty much orgasm the same amount in actual sort of together sex. But yeah, separately, I'm half as much.
I think without it being sort of something we even consciously think about, when we have sex, we both tend to orgasm. Unless there's a time constraint and it's like we've got to go and pick the kids up, or we've got to get out of the house for some reason, or there's little hands knocking on the door or something silly like that. But generally, we'd both finish, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I mean, we're not totally about just about the orgasm, but I am fairly sort of focused on it as a thing.
Yeah.
Like, I like to come if we're having sex.
Do you think that it is the norm for that to be the case, where
I don't think so.
Both men and women orgasm during sex?
No, I'm pretty certain it's not, actually. And especially since we've seen other people having sex. We've been to sort of clubs and things where we've seen other people having sex, and the women just don't seem to be anywhere near as well. I've helped myself along regularly, and I just really like to do that. But they don't seem to anywhere near as much as I do. And I always thought that was quite unusual, that I was just like, why do women not masturbate during sex? It's like, it's part of what I do. It's just part of sex for me.
You've got quite annoyed when we've been at clubs. And you're like, nobody's diddling with themselves. Why not?
Why is no one doing this? And also, like, why are they not, like, all the men are, if they're getting ready, just sort of standing around waiting, they're all sort of keeping it going. Yeah. Keeping the fires burning, sort of thing. And the women just are not. So they're surely always playing catch up. And I just thought, well, surely you want to be, if nothing else, sort of slightly ahead, because women take longer to orgasm. So, I'm always like, well, I'll get going and we'll end up in the same place, sort of thing.
That is so interesting that is something that works for you. And I think probably it is down to the level of masturbation, because I just don't think women masturbate as much as me and you do.
No, it's a bit of a hobby of mine, to be honest.
I'm an everyday gal, do you know what I mean? Like,
so we had this, so we were saying, and I'm probably I said about 0.5, 0.7. Yeah. If you average across a week. So not like every day, but most days. Yeah. Which is, I think, much lower than the average bloke.
Or even the average woman. I don't know. I don't actually have stats on how many women orgasm how often, but I know from conversations that I've had with female friends, they're like, what? What's masturbation? I'm like, wait, what? Stop. Don't say that to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a bit of a hobby of mine right from when I first discovered it, basically.
Do you think that you and I would both say that us masturbating more frequently has then led to us having better sex?
I think so, definitely.
I would 100% agree.
Yeah, I think so. I think we do together. I don't know if the sex we have is any different to the sex you had with other people.
So I think, thinking back to other people I've been with for more than a one night stand or more than just a couple of times, and whether I can just pick them, but I think back that people I've had fairly long term relationships have always been quite high sex drive, and probably would rival the two of you for frequency of masturbation, but it definitely helps. Definitely, because I've also had sex with people that in the past that don't do that, and it's almost as if the whole thing is just about this, when I begin and when I finish, and that's kind of it. And even with me trying to encourage it, there's not really that much desire or prioritising of with her to have an orgasm.
That is what is the case, I think, and I would say that's caused by porn personally. But just 'cause I'm quite passionate about that. That's just how I feel.
I think it partly is because it's very much aimed on from the guy's point of view, but also I think women themselves don't help that as well. I think there's a degree of a sort of relying on the guy to give us an orgasm, and I think you're responsible for your own.
Yeah.
And even if you're together, I still think there's a responsibility, kind of to get yourself at least primed almost.
Yeah.
To
I've
help.
honestly never
I feel
thought
like
of it that way. I find it really interesting to hear. I'm like, it's so in.
it feels kind of lazy to me. I feel like I want to have an orgasm, and I am very laser focused on it. So
yeah.
I do everything I can to get us there, to try and get us there together as well. Like, I feel like we both then can do that together. But I think, I don't know from experience particularly, but I feel like from what I've seen of other people, that it's more like actually it's kind of the guy's job, and I think that's too much pressure.
It is, but also
it's not fair as well.
I don't know, because that's what they expect of us to do, though, Fran.
Well, yes and no. I think it's kind of
they're not going to finish themselves off during sex.
Well, I don't know. Our experiences are slightly different.
Okay, well, I had an ex where that was the case, but it was just because he couldn't come any other way, and I was like, oh, there's something wrong with me, and it was just there was something wrong with our relationship. But I don't know. I guess it goes two ways, isn't it? So like, good sex for me, I find it very easy to orgasm. I'm very lucky in that sense. I tend to have multiple orgasms back to back. I don't have to bother helping myself out or anything. I'm very sensitive, but it's all part of the process. And then in that way, like I've said it quite explicitly to my partners that my aim is not to get an orgasm every time. Like, I don't want you to feel like you have that pressure on you, but at the same time, it can't be every single time he's going to come and then like, oh, that's it. And it's like, doing the work for him,
I think that's what society shows us, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's kind of the status quo, that kind of, oh, well, I'm done, and I don't know whether you sort yourself out or whether that's just sort of it, or whether, oh, well, I'll come and then I'll make you come sort of thing. I feel like that's, like I said, we are very much about a crescendo together. And I think maybe we've gone a bit sort of Pavlov about this, that in my mind that's what sex is, and now that's what we aim to achieve every time. And that maybe I have sort of overly focused us on that. I'm not sure.
I think part of it is about just the mechanics of it. It is, a dick is a blunt instrument, isn't it? Whereas, a vagina is a complex electrical device. It's not such a complex physical thing for a male to have an orgasm as it is for a woman. And I think that's the thing. If you have sex for a set time, 10 minutes, say, it's fairly straightforward for the man to have an orgasm, and there's a lot more to it often. And that's not always the case. There's loads of reasons why that wouldn't, but
I think also you're saying about multiple orgasms. I've never been able to have multiple orgasms, and I find that I get too sensitive afterwards. So for me, it being a finish is kind of important, because otherwise I can get quite sore, actually.
Yeah. I used to see a guy who could also have multiple orgasms. It was massively overwhelming.
God, I've never seen that.
I was like, what is the point in anything? Because there was no final point. You're just like, oh, well, I'm still here. It's been 4 hours. And you just lose the sort of, you're like, all right, I get it now. And that's me saying that.
I once slept with someone who he was proudly telling me he could go for hours. And I slept with him, and I just found him terrifying. I was like, when is the off switch? Like, what happens? Because he just kept going. And I was like, oh, God, this is terrifying. This man is just, like, eating me.
Yeah.
Like, alive. And there's just going to be a husk left at the end of it. What do I do? How do I stop this? Once that thought enters your head, you're never coming.
Yeah.
So it became quite, unsatisfying for me, despite the fact that it started off as a boast for how he could satisfy everyone.
Yeah.
Effectively.
I'm going to dive into the stats early on because I think we've got a lot to discuss here. So 3 out of 4 women said they can't achieve orgasm during sex. And while 30% of men said they thought the best way to help a woman orgasm is through penetrative sexual acts, more than half of women pointed to clitoral stimulation as a way to make them finish. I guess that's what you were saying earlier in sort of helping yourself, because, you know, and that's what I think, what we were saying about masturbation earlier, I think masturbation is beneficial to your sex life because you know what works for you. You're like, you know, this is what's going to get me. So like for me, I know it's very unique what works for me. And I just know I need to, when I'm actually in sex itself, it's a matter of me just shifting my body position to enjoy that to the level that I know I can. And I think masturbation allows you that and allows you that recognition of what works for me. And I think I've said in a previous podcast that women can have 7 different types of orgasm, you know, clitoral, cervical orgasm as well as another one that exists. I can't actually list all of them off the top of my head, but there's loads of different types. So it's not like it's like a one size fit all. It's never going to be that for any woman, I don't think. But
I think I am too hyper focused. Like for me, it's all about the clit. But then I'm pretty certain I've managed to have cervical orgasms. I think that's and I think I know how to achieve that, like internally.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that you don't recognise until you're told about it.
Yeah, perineum as well. Your perineum. That is definitely a good one. Try that one out. That's my recommendation there. Okay, so 20% of women said they never orgasm compared to 2% of men. So that's 20% of women who don't know what that feels like and don't know what's right. And like from, you know, shows that we've seen where women don't, you know, you ask them have they orgasm, they're like, oh, I think so, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's not, that's a clear no. Once, you know what I
they're
mean?
missing out on an aspect of life. It's like going through life not knowing what chocolate is. You know, it's a big part of life, and it's a big joy to a lot of people. And I think just to not have that, I think is quite damaging.
Yeah.
And obviously, some of that's going to be voluntary, but most of that's probably not.
I know. Does this surprise you at all, these stats, Andy?
Sadly, it doesn't now. I know from our experience that I think we've both got a fairly high sex drive, and I'm probably ahead of you in that sense. And we're comfortable and open enough to acknowledge it. You know, we sort ourselves out from time to time. And we've been obviously focused on when we have sex. It's always about both of us, ideally, that we both come. But it doesn't surprise me at all that to hear that there's that gap. I mean, the 2% of men, I'm surprised that's not a little bit higher, that number, to be honest.
For men? What would you think it would have been more men that can't achieve orgasm outside of sex?
Yeah, I would have thought it was a little bit higher, just because of conditions and whatever that might lead to that. But
maybe there's a element of dishonesty there.
Yeah, possibly. But the 20% of women, that doesn't surprise me, but I wish the number was a lot lower.
Yeah. Lesbian and bisexual women have significantly more orgasms than heterosexual women.
Really?
Yeah, but I'm guessing that's because lesbians probably are very much more familiar with the vagina and the clitoris. And
also, again, it's not all about the cock. It's the other way around, you know. And so then it's not, sex for them isn't necessarily about the man's performance effectively. It's about an orgasm more so. And
interestingly, going back to that point on like knowing locations, when asked to label a diagram of a vulva, 58% of people couldn't describe the function of the urethra, 47% didn't know what the labia was, and 52% didn't know what the vagina was.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I actually watched a video the other day, and a guy was like, wait, you have 3 holes down there? I'm like, yes, we do. Like, is that not common knowledge? But then at the same time, who teaches us that? You know, we've probably like really brushed over really briefly in sex ed in school.
We got it quite a lot at school. That's all we got taught. We didn't get taught the emotional side of it at all.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I don't know if I've said this one. 39% of women said they always orgasm when they masturbate compared to 6% during sex. Have I said that one yet? I don't know.
You haven't. 39%. Again, I'd have thought that number was higher. That seems quite low.
But yeah, for when they masturbate, I think there are definitely. I don't know about you, Fran, but for me, it's so much harder, I think, for me to stay focused when I'm on my own.
Yeah, I also fall asleep quite regularly.
I just give up. I'm like, oh, fuck's sake, I'm just going to bed. Like,
bored now.
This isn't going to work today. I don't know what's going on. Whereas when I'm in actual sex itself, like that never happens. It's once in a million, you know, it literally doesn't happen for me, luckily.
Yeah, I think the rest of your body gets on board, though.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's the thing. I think maybe if you're not really feeling it, then the rest of your body's like, yeah, whatever.
And I think you probably get in your head a bit when you're on your own as well. And like,
It's going to be a good thing.
You know, I've got things to do.
Yeah. Yeah, or tired.
Yeah.
You've told me stories, though, friend, of you've gone to sleep at night whilst masturbating, and I've woke up 3 or 4 times, carried on, and never finished.
Yeah.
And 3 or 4 stabs at it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have. And I've also got partway through and gone, God, I'm knackered, I can't be bothered, and given up. So that might also be
has that ratio gone down since you got a rabbit?
Yeah. Yeah, no, you've been introduced to the wonders of, oh, look, here's a 3-second finish.
Oh.
I was late to the party with rabbits.
How quick can you orgasm?
A
Like if
minute
you
and a
really
half.
put your mind to it on your own.
I have been timed at a minute.
Who's timing that?
Porno Dave. It was 3 minutes, actually. It wasn't fast. It's harder when you've got someone watching you.
I can just see a pit crew around the bed with the spare tyres and a clock watch.
Funny you were saying that about the diagrams, though. My 3-year-old, she calls it a gina.
Mm-hmm.
And she knows what that's called. And she knew what that was called at, like, just turned 2.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty certain I didn't at that age. In fact, I'm pretty certain I didn't. Possibly even Georgia saying no.
Was it referred to as
She's
flower
9.
or the
Just your
front
bits.
bottom?
Yeah, yeah. They think they're a lot better now with giving things the names they should have.
Yeah.
And not like cushioning kids from their own bodies. I mean, men's bits don't get called weird things and just sort of brushed under the carpet, but girls do, and I think that actually gets in the way of us knowing what our bodies do and how it looks and how it feels and things.
And us feeling confident in them as well and being able to talk about them in that sense.
Maybe because they're all on display. But yeah, I think there's a lot of women who just never look down there effectively.
Yeah, and exploration. That isn't something I really had to do until I had problems with my cervix, and then I was like, oh, I want to explore. I've never seen down there. And I got a mirror and like little made up stirrups and did my own little showing. And I was like, wow, I've never seen what it looks like down there.
That's it in front of a mirror. You see, that's something I've got
I'm
quite
quite
used to.
regularly sat in front of a mirror when I walk in the bedroom. Like, what are you doing?
What?
But it is, you can't see it, can we?
I think you also need to know when something changes. You need to know, and
yeah,
you need to know what that looks
TikTok
like.
trend, we're going on an adventure.
Yeah. Even my eldest comes in and is like, "Oh, Mum, what are you doing? What are you looking for?"
I know where my cervix is now, and I know how to make myself be able to feel my cervix through moving the muscles in the right
I
place.
had to. What was that for? Was that for my coil? I think it might have been. And they asked me to feel, and I was like, my arms aren't long enough, love. And so I said to the doctor, I can't reach. My arms aren't long
Bear
enough.
down.
Yeah, I have very short arms.
It's probably that you've got a very high cervix more than anything.
But yeah, there was something, also like putting in pessary at some point for something, can't remember what it was. It's probably to do with children. And again, they're like, oh yeah, you just, have a look and check and things and make sure it's all in the right place and then all that sort of thing. And you think, actually, we don't have that kind of knowledge of our bodies.
Or awareness either. Like, being able to feel my cervix is what made me realise there was a lump there. Then I got that checked out and luckily it was benign. But had I not known that was there and it was something worse than that, do you know what I mean? It's like they never say go check your cervix, whereas it's like always, check your balls.
Well, funnily enough, I've had a problem recently as well. I mean, I went to the doctor in the last couple of weeks because I've had a problem with my cervix and didn't know that it was a problem, and went to the doctor, and it literally because bodies produce discharge as normal, and I was like, I am the wettest person I've ever met. Why is this the case? You know, this is supposed to be to do with sex. And I was like, I'm just walking around Tesco. Just like, it's ridiculous. And apparently it's a normal thing. It's a dysfunction of the cervix that 40% of women have.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you really, really wet and makes you occasionally bleed during sex. But it's like not a problem. It's just something to do with the cells being on the outside. But like, that's 40% of women have that, and I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
And even the doctor didn't sound like she was particularly... It's something that she tells people a lot of the time. And so if 40% of men had something like that, it would be known about.
Yeah. I know, it's interesting.
It's
isn't
just,
it?
we just don't know about our bodies enough. And I think that probably gets in the way of our pleasure.
Yeah.
And that actually self-knowledge might be part of the problem. I don't think it's just blaming it on men. I think self-knowledge is a lot of the issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that does go both ways to a degree, though, because, you know, when you're a kid and you're growing up, you know, parents, doctors will see you naked, and they'll, you know, if there's a problem early on, it'll be diagnosed and it'll be dealt with. But as you grow up, you know, nobody, you know, and from my experience, you know, once you get into adolescence, nobody sees your privates apart from you. So you don't know if there's a problem. You don't know necessarily.
And 47 other people in the changing room. But apart from that...
Well, yeah, but they're not going to point anything out, are they? But the thing is, you grow up and you don't know what you're doing. Nobody, even as from a guy's perspective, there's loads of locker room talk about wanking and things like that. But you don't actually know. You just sort of learn yourself.
We've become a bit sort of... We start locking it away, and then actually that knowledge sort of disappears.
I can honestly, it's true. I can remember the first wank I ever had. I can remember it in detail, and it was like, oh my God, this is happening. And then it finished, and I was like, oh my God, what have I just done? And there was like a bit of a shame moment. I'm like, shit, it was like a rite of passage almost. But I can still remember it, and the feelings associated to it really clearly. It's weird.
So I really can.
Obviously, from that point, I quickly got beyond the shame, and it became
Best thing you ever found.
quite a significant hobby of my teenage years. But
first few times I masturbated, I didn't know about orgasms, and I didn't know about completion, and it was all... I never got to the completed part. I was just doing something that felt nice.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing at all.
It came at me completely out of the blue.
It was pre sort of sex with other people. So.
Yeah. For me, it hit me like a bus. I was 12. And it was during the night. It was when I'd go for a wee. It was when I was sitting on the bus. It was like I had a problem.
Yeah, no, I did.
And then I was like, wait, I can make myself do this.
I used to masturbate in school, in lessons. Because, you know, well, I think a lot of kids do. You've all, or not necessarily during lessons. I think that may have been going a bit further than the average people. But you've just discovered yourselves, and you've just discovered this amazing thing, and why would you lock it away for 8 hours a day, sort of thing?
Yeah.
I think that's probably quite common. But nobody talks about it because it's a shame kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It might surprise you that I can remember at that period of my life when obviously all of your friends are probably having a wank 6, 7, 8 times a day probably because you're that age as a boy, and that's just what you're doing every spare minute you've got and you're on your own. It was never talked about. Nobody ever talks about it. It was like something to take the mickey out of if somebody even half suggested they'd had a wank the night before. Everyone would take the piss. But the reality was everybody was doing it.
I've never
probably
talked
5
about
or 6 times a day, but it was like a shame thing.
with
That's not a
friends.
healthy thing.
No.
It's not a healthy way of dealing with it.
But then also, when you talk about sex, I mean, there's always jokes about, you know, the clitoris being impossible to find, which I think is bullshit, to be honest. Mine especially is pierced, so it's like, you know, there is just like literally a button to find mine. So, you know, I point everyone in the direction. I want it to be honest.
Point everyone.
Just literally people in the street. But no, I mean, I want it to be used and found and sorted out. But I think maybe that isn't something that in society we really actually give that some time, that actually you're, as a guy, coming to this part of anatomy as something that you've never seen and it looks weird and there's no manual for it.
I think it's education to a degree, and it's also self-education. I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I've never failed to find one.
But also what to do with it as well.
It's not a needle in a haystack, is it?
No.
It's a fairly isolated area. It's not a huge area. You go searching. It's a small area, and you can tell from the person's reaction if you find it. Yep, I've got it now. I've never got that concept of failing to find it. I don't see what's so hard.
Saying also when we're talking about porn, you're saying about people just like banging on the clit like there's
DJ.
no tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that sort of thing isn't talked about as well. You know, like it's a sensitive area.
And I think girls can be very good at faking it. Like, let's not miss that fact out. We can get very good at going.
And we're just, what are you doing there? You're just hurting your own.
Yeah.
Your own pleasure.
Yeah.
As a guy, if ever I was having sex with a woman and I knew that she'd faked it, that would just ruin me.
Have you ever faked
I'd hate it. Me?
Yeah.
I think I have once.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. I don't think you would know if a girl has faked it. Because I spoke to my partner about this and I was like, oh, has a girl ever like faked it with you? And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, well, did you ask them if they'd orgasm? He's like, no. I could just tell. And I feel like that's what most guys would say. But it's like, oh, well, that's exactly what we wanted to do. It's exactly what we were hoping for. I just think
that's really stupid. Like,
well, it is and it isn't. Like, I can understand where you're coming from because you're like, oh, if you can't enjoy sex with a partner, which by the looks of it, most women can't, in the sense that you and I are fortunate to be able to, then you just want it to get over with and be done.
But then again, that's going back to the marriage or commitment being the death of sex. Well, if that's your experience of sex, then no wonder you don't particularly want it once you've become properly attached to someone. You're like, oh, I don't have to sort of lure them in with sex. They're already there. I don't need to do it anymore.
Yeah,
effectively, and that's not helping either of you.
So let's get back to my stats because I've got some good stuff coming up now. So only 65% of straight women always have an orgasm during sex. I mean, these are ranging figures here. I think these are all from different sites. Anyway, that number goes even lower when looking at the statistics of casual hookups. On a first-time hookup, the gap is 80% of men to only 40% of women.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, even for me on one-night stands or casual hookups, it's a lot lower for me. And I'm, like I said, pretty focused.
Yeah.
And pretty good at getting there. But even so, I don't always come if I'm with someone.
Yeah.
Especially on a first time. Like if it's, I know obviously with the one night stand that is just a first time on itself. You don't really know what each other likes, and you don't really communicate that well. I don't think
that doesn't surprise me at all.
It's that comfortableness.
From, like I say, from the male perspective, it's a fairly straightforward, largely physical process.
Mm-hmm.
It's not hard, and rightly or wrongly, it is a fairly definitive full stop on things, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's not to say that there shouldn't be a consideration to carry on stimulating each other, but I'm not surprised that it's double for men than it is women.
I've also gone into things where you just sort of fall into something and you're like, oh shit, didn't really intend to go this far, and then you're sort of like, oh well, we've got here, we might as well carry on. But then your brain has had that thought, and you're like, I'm never going to come now.
Yeah.
I
know what you mean.
I've buggered my own pleasure here, basically.
This is my favourite little thing that I found, I think, in my research. This is by Tanya Combs, who's a sex expert that we've referred to in previous podcasts. So this is her quote. She said, if we look at movies and porn, heterosexual sex here, it looks like you put a penis inside a vagina and then the woman will automatically come and it's a few thrusts and then everyone's happy. Because that is literally what it is, isn't it? 2-minute film shots of them having sex and boom, everybody's sorted.
Yeah.
It's not the reality.
And that's fine if you're the sort of woman who can come really quickly, but some people take a really long time and you sort of forget it. And there is a gap between how quickly women come and how quickly men come. And if sex is over when men are finished, then there's a whole range of women up at the top there who aren't going to get there in time.
Oh my God, wait for what I'm about to show you because it's going to change your life. So I'm just going to shoot to the second page. So it takes 15 to 20 minutes of foreplay for a woman's pelvic floor muscles to drop down and make room for a penis to come in.
Really?
boom, mic drop right there. Because that's like, I've been used to sex where it's like, oh, go on then, because I'm quite easy to like switch on. But that's not giving me the optimum range of motion and comfort. I'll just sit with discomfort. I'm like, oh, why is it sometimes like this? Because I'm not aroused enough, because they have not aroused me enough, because it's too focused on, not too focused, but we haven't communicated in the right way that it's a mutual respect situation here.
I get that. I totally get that, because I'm, like I said, very focused on it being very much as about us just jumping in. I'm not really into foreplay particularly, but maybe I'm doing myself a disservice.
Yeah, maybe you could have even better orgasms by giving that 15-20 minutes of like, and stimulation and turning on doesn't just have to be clitoral, although Tanya Cohn says for a lot of women they do need direct clitoral stimulation in order to have an orgasm.
No, I'm into nipples. So
Nipples.
Generally we are.
Yeah, nipples and like, you know, dirty talk, that's something that we do. We can't be sensible enough for dirty talk. I'm not. He's the expert. I'm definitely. It's still a work in progress. I'm really struggling with the lapping thing at the moment, as I mentioned to you earlier.
We do.
It's a bit of an issue for me because once I start lapping, I can't stop, and it just ruins everything. But it's just too funny. But there's loads of different ways. You know,
there should be laughter in sex as well. I think that's the other thing. We're too serious about it.
It definitely kills the sort of erections usually when laughter happens, though.
Oh yeah.
So another reason, which is Tanya says, very few couples allow time for the woman to become adequately aroused. So as well as that 15 to 20 minutes for the pelvic floor to be in the right place, it takes an average woman 45 to 60 minutes to become fully aroused. And in that time, lots of things need to happen to allow a penis to enter the vagina easily without any pain or discomfort, but such as that pelvic floor shift. So that's like just a whole different kettle of fish. Probably you and I who are like, oh, come on, we can do this nice and quick and sharp. And do you know what I mean?
So there's probably a lot of women who find sex quite painful. I mean, I know a lot of dysfunctions where sex becomes painful.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing apparently with my cervix can make it painful as well. But if you're not leaving that time, then that's just your experience of sex.
Yeah.
Whereas actually it might not be if you've just given it enough of a run-up.
Here's another one of Tanya's fabulous lines. I feel like we should have her on here because she just brings out some brilliant stuff. A lot of people think that the vagina is just a little hole that's waiting for a penis to drop in for a visit. But actually, it's like a squashed flat balloon most of the time, and it needs to be aroused. I love it. I feel like that's so true. So it's like that 15 minutes is that pelvic floor, dropping down, not lifting up. She says women have the same kind of erectile tissues as men, but all on the inside. We need a lot of time for that stuff to come into play.
Because you can't reach it in the same way. So getting a guy started physically is easier.
I didn't know that.
No, I
didn't realise that.
And I've realised actually because, you know, when you go straight into sex, especially if it's pretty hard and it starts to hurt because they're banging off your cervix.
And dry as anything.
I tend not to be. I'm one of these people who's always moist, which is another thing that people say to you. You know, especially when you were younger, oh, you're really wet. You must be really turned on. I was like, that's just life.
I thought it was a Roman god when we first got together.
Just life.
And I realised I wasn't.
No, just bit of a damp person. But anyway, yeah. So I didn't realise the whole, because you know when you've started too hard and too deep and it does hurt and you think, oh, we just need to back off a bit. I've never really thought why.
Yeah.
And realised why. And that probably could be worse for other people.
Yeah. When women get very excited, the uterus starts bouncing around and gets pulled back and out of the way, pulling the cervix back with it. For a lot of women, if you get a penis banging into your cervix, it can feel very uncomfortable or unpleasant.
Yeah, it's pretty sore.
And that it's just like, it does make so much sense seeing the difference. Because, like, I know that as well. Like, when I'm psychologically not in the necessarily the right frame of mind, like, particularly, like, I think we spoke about it in previous podcasts where if we're feeling down, like, we'll go and masturbate or something, or if I'm feeling down, then my partner knows, oh, I know, I'll cheer her up, because it always does. But that doesn't necessarily mean my body's ready for that.
Wank. Yeah.
Yeah, my body's like, nah, bitch, we're not doing that today.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to make this painful for you because I don't want this 'cause I feel sad.
But the same thing about masturbating. I mean, there's those times where you're like, right, I'm going to do this because I'm down, and then your body's like, nah, I'm not up for this all round. And I think maybe there's a bit more of a process to it than I thought originally.
Tanya stresses the importance of allowing time for the female partner to become aroused, as we've said previously. One of the advantages of really warming up is that there are parts of the vagina on the inside that we call the orgasmic plateau. She says it's got all of these lovely little pinball spots that feel great when you hit them. You need to have blood and mucus in the area and flowing to make it work. You can't just shove a penis in there. Just love it.
I think I know what that is, because there's certain times when we have sex where I can pull internally and I don't know what I'm pulling or how I'm pulling, but then everything you do feels amazing. And I think it's that. I don't actually know. But that's the thing, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm fairly good at this sort of thing. So how do we teach kids to be able to achieve that?
How do we teach adults to do this? Because there's clearly a lot of adults that have not caught up.
I just thought it was just this magic trick, effectively.
I think it's a lot about realising that there is this orgasm gap, and that I think, like, a lot of men think, oh yeah, well...
A willingness to learn about it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of men think, oh, well, you know, she made the noises like she came, so therefore I'm pretty sure she did. Whereas in reality, I don't think that's the case for, like, over 60% of women that we're talking about here, which is crazy.
And I think maybe we're rubbish communicators about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're rubbish communicators, but it's why we're rubbish communicators. And I think it's because there's this sort of fear around, oh, they won't like me if I ask for what I need.
But then, even then, I mean, I didn't know that was a thing, to be able to tell you that I can do that and that I know what that is.
Yeah. So most importantly, Tanya says, if you're getting close, don't stop. If you're getting very excited and if you're feeling close to coming and you want to come, whatever you're doing, don't stop. Keep doing the same thing. If you stop and change it up, the clitoris is moving back and you might miss that boat. And I feel like it's such a, it's, when you're like, oh yeah, they've got it, just stay exactly where you are. And then they move and you're like, what?
Yeah. Yes.
And it's just, you get like blue clitoris. Blue clit. Like blue balls, but the clit. I don't know. It's just me.
It's the
but you know, that does put a lot of the pressure back onto the guy. Because I'll know sometimes, because I know you well, I'll know if you're nearly there. And then I can tell if, that's just the angle, that's just a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you start getting cramp or something, like, shit, I can't stop, I've got to fucking... And even the other day, I thought you'd finished.
Because I was noisy.
Quietly, you were quite noisy. Right, so I kind of stopped, and you were like, don't stop!
God, don't stop!
And thankfully, we didn't miss the boat, did we?
Miss the boat. No, but there is definitely... And you get that frustration then that comes in, isn't there, when something's changed. And sometimes it's not even like you haven't moved or something, or just something's just slightly gone off the boil, and you're like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
Again, as soon as you've had that thought, that's it.
Yeah.
And it takes forever to come back. But I don't have multiple orgasms, so I don't really understand how to create those. Is it just a natural thing that you started with?
No, so I was told, you know, oh, you can only orgasm once. So I was like, oh yeah, did that for years, and then started having sex, and they were like, oh, I've not come yet, and I was like, all right then, carry on. And I was like, hold up, there's me going again, and you just keep going.
Yeah, but then
and then
it's
you'll be like
overwhelming.
If it's too much, then obviously don't. Like if it's too overwhelming. But I'm quite energetically expressive, so that's why I think we talked about before. I'm a very noisy person during sex. I'm very physically expressive. I like to move my body quite a bit. It's very energetic for me. That's my style. So it's like, I think a lot of energy gets released through that.
Sorry, I was just comparing. I'm like, yeah, you're like I am physically when talking, but I'm very focused and quite quiet and fairly still.
On this,
and I'm just like
orgasm.
Yeah. No, I'm like an accountant when it comes to finding my orgasm. Whereas you're like some sort of creative director.
I am, yeah.
Seriously, if there was a motion sensor lighting on, it'd go off when you're having sex because you don't move much at all.
I'm very, yeah.
They're perfectly still.
Yeah, I mean, depending on position, obviously, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not particularly expressive physically.
Oh no, because I'm a yoga teacher. I've got a lot of hip strength. I've got a lot of thrusting power. It doesn't matter whether I'm upside down or on the ceiling or whatever. I will not just. I have to always move. But I'm like that in day-to-day life. I've just got too much energy to exist. It's the ADHD. But that's why I think a lot of it comes out that way, and then I can just keep going. And it doesn't completely drain me. It does for him. So when he's gone, he's completely drained. He can't carry on.
Yeah.
He has to just sleep for like 5 minutes. So I know.
That's more me than you, isn't it?
We're the opposite, I think, because that's the
Yeah.
thing, isn't it? Usually women are more energised and men are docile after the
Yeah.
orgasm. But we're the opposite, and I feel quite lively, and you're just,
I want to sleep.
you just want to go to sleep. So we
Yeah.
have to sort of book that
It's
trend, don't we?
interesting, isn't it? Why that happens?
I think it's more common than you think as well with women, the need to sleep.
Yeah.
We joke about it being men, but I think it's actually more common than you think.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it is. Absolutely. Well, I feel like we've covered loads today. I also feel like we could talk about this forever. But thank you so much to everybody for listening. And please give us a review, a like, have a look on our TikTok or social media. And we hope to see you again for the next podcast.
Sex.
It's not that deep.